My name's Tolbert. I'm the Executive Director for Southern Indiana Center for Independent Living, located in Bedford. We serve 8 counties in our service area. Besides that, I'm on the State Council for Independent Living as the Secretary Treasurer for the State Council. I am the President of the Paralyzed Hoosier Veterans. I was the past National Director for the Paralyzed Veterans of America. So I've been active with veterans issues as a veteran myself. And we serve a lot of veterans with our center. We serve a lot of veterans with our home care. So we get a chance to follow up some places that VA doesn't have the chance to do that, Veterans Administration. On top of that, I do a little farming. I spent 11 years in the service and 2 tours in Vietnam before I picked this medal up in Baumholder, Germany, in a vehicle accident, a training accident. So I'm lucky, and and this is 38 years ago, 1971. So I've been paraplegic for 38 years. So it has given me some experience to see some things. I was on the EEOC board for IU University Southeast and Affirmative Action and a few other places. So I've been in the movement, the independent living movement, for 38 years, one way or another. So I've seen some things change, a lot of things change for the better. Okay. The early days were, very crude, not too many. There was a lot of bills out there. There are laws that people were trying to follow, but I don't think they had a central theme or a central place to go to ask questions, or they didn't know exactly if they were doing things right. They weren't wanting to do things right, but they were good natured to do things. Most public places were trying to adopt just because it was mandated through other laws. But there's nothing like ADA that says, gave you a guideline and gave you some place to call for technical assistance, or gave you a manual or what should be put in place. And so when that came about, I think with ADA, that made some big changes, not only in the public sector, but in the private sector, as well as the employment sector. Maybe in the national movement through maybe the Paralyzed Veterans of America, which is, Justin Dart said there would be no ADA without PVA, and I think the PVA had a strong hand in twisting the president's arm into making getting it signed. I think there's some things there that went behind the doors that we'll never know about, that people in Washington that had some pull in the Paralyzed Veterans of America seen a way to get this thing to happen. So through the PVA I was active, through IU University while going to school I was active, but nothing as dramatic as to when I became involved with the State Council on Independent Living and became a center director. And then everything became together, focused more on what we were doing. And of course ADA became our guideline then, or our Bible to do some things. ADA was not a state issue, it was a national issue. And we were at the time, we were writing our representatives in Washington, D.C. and going to Washington, D.C. with the Paralyzed Veterans of America. They went up to and lobbied several times for ADA. So I was part of that group that went to Washington, D.C. With the PVA to see that it would be implemented, even though it was not a local issue, it was a national issue. I think a lot of people didn't take it serious, didn't see the need for this law. I think that there's not a lot of animosity at that time towards ADA. I remember the Chamber of Commerce was not in favor of it. We were getting a lot of emails at that time, a lot of mail telling us that this is going to put people out of work. It's going to be a hindrance for small business. There's a lot of things there's a lot of negative output to that, and of course we see that ADA has been an asset to some employers and has actually increased their productivity. So it's not, we didn't put anybody out of business, and it didn't put anybody out of business. Well, ADA is a civil rights law. Back in the 80s, we didn't think about the movement, the independent living movement, being a civil rights thing. I think we more or less thought that was a need, that we had the rights for these things that other folks had. We didn't see it as much as the civil rights movement in the 60s. But more and more as we learned and learned more about ADA, we've seen it to be a civil rights issue, and the rights of people with disabilities are the same as anybody else. So it's a civil rights, and so the independent living movement became more or less a civil rights movement. And the laws that we see now, they're on statute. They are really civil rights. It's been an interesting life, an interesting movement also. I mean, you see back 38 years ago, and the changes have been made, the dramatic changes have been made, and a lot of laws have been changed, a lot of laws have come in effect. ADA has been just one of several things that has made this movement move forward. The Air Traffic Act, like I spoke about, that passed back in the 80s. There's several other laws that have been in effect. And of course, ADA has promoted a great deal more. And of course, have an act that came along 4 years ago. That was a major move for us to have a voice at the voting place. So, and we're still going forth. Okay, there's a lot more out there to be done. We're not. ADA didn't solve all the problems, and it didn't create a lot of problems, but it centralizes them so we get answers. And there's more to be done. We have a lot of rural areas that are very conservative and don't change. But most rural areas in Indiana have been granted revitalization to their downtown, and with that little part of that said you had to meet ADA requirements, so they made the sidewalks accessible, and some of the business seen that was the way, and to get more people into the business. If the sidewalk's okay, we can get the doors open, we can get people in, and increase our volume of business. We still have some business. They don't come, so we don't need to make it accessible. You know, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? That type of scenario, and don't realize they're losing business because they're not accessible. So we in the disability community have to educate the private enterprise that, you know, if you change, things will happen. Build it and they will come. And that's been proven over and over again. You build it, they'll come. Lucas Stadium is a good example. It's totally accessible, and people are coming in wheelchairs. People are there in wheelchairs. Okay, so I don't think the Dome was that accessible, and I don't think Market Square was that accessible. Conseco Fieldhouse is. So if you build it, they will come. And recreation is part of life. Whether you're in a chair or with a disability or not, you should be in recreation of some type. I was with COVA, and COVA started with Amy Cook Lurvy, and she goes back into the 50s when she started COVA. It was primarily to look for special ed. And she did a great deal, and COVA did a great deal in changing Article 7 in the state of Indiana, making accessibility in the school and making IEPs more friendly to the student as well as the parent, and making tearing down a lot of obstacles. So she was instrumental in doing a lot of things. And her and Mary Lee, Amy was from Indianapolis, Mary Lee was from Nashville and had a child with significant disabilities, but had worked to make several laws here in Indiana changed. Both of those ladies have passed now, but they did a lot for special ed, did a lot for the independent living movement to move forward. And so those people should be thought of when we think about this movement, where we've been with it, and where we want to go with it.